A bipartisan group of lawmakers will meet with President Trump at the White House Wednesday to discuss gun violence. On Monday, the president met with governors from 38 states and Puerto Rico. Guns dominated much of that discussion. Jill Colvin is a White House reporter for the Associated Press. She joins me now from the White House. So, Jill, President Trump has said that he supports new gun legislation after the mass shooting in Parkland, Florida, but he has also been a staunch supporter of gun rights in the past. How difficult an issue is this, considering the president's stand and what he said about the NRA and his support for the NRA?
Yeah, the president has a very kind of difficult needle to thread here. At one side, he's somebody who has really relished his support from the NRA. He talked about often during the campaign trail how he'd gotten their support very strongly, very early on in the campaign. On the other hand, he's very much feeling like right now he has an obligation to do something. This is a president who has really sold himself as this bipartisan deal maker, someone who can reach across the aisle, someone who can get both sides to work together. Now, in practice, that actually hasn't been particularly successful, but that's something he still likes to talk a lot about wanting to do, and he feels like he has an opportunity to act here. I think the other side of this that is really interesting, though, is the fact that the president's support from the NRA kind of gives him a little bit of cover here, especially from his supporters, where he's able to, the big thing he's been pushing that the NRA opposes is the idea of raising the age limit for certain gun purchases from 18 to 21. And the NRA has come out in opposition to that, but nonetheless, lawmakers, you've seen many lawmakers who are typically very supportive of gun rights, folks like Marco Rubio in Florida, have also voiced an openness to that kind of idea. So it sometimes feels like the president is able to give these conservatives a little bit of cover.
And do we have a sense of the depth of commitment to, for instance, the very measure that you just outlined, given the NRA's opposition to the idea of raising the age requirement for some gun purchases?
Yeah, I mean, this is something that the president really seemed very interested, especially at the end of last week, after he had those sit-downs, both with lawmakers and with the survivors of gun violence in schools. Over the weekend, however, the president wound up having lunch with some of the NRA's head honchos, and some people picked up in what was seen to be maybe a little bit of rolling back in his rhetoric, or at least the rhetoric from the White House today. Less of an interest, potentially, in pursuing that, more of an interest in pursuing the background check legislation that's currently making its way through Congress. We've also got a situation here where the president doesn't have that much authority to be able to do things unilaterally. He's able to look at the bump stock issue. There's a potential that he can do that administratively, but he's going to need Congress to come on board any type of major changes. And what we've seen on the Hill today over the last couple of days is some resistance to doing anything beyond this background check bill that's already making its way through Congress and, would make states, would compel them to actually go along with what they're supposed to be doing, but wouldn't really take any major steps to fixing, what gun advocates describe as those gun show loopholes, the background check loopholes, where people can still purchase guns through private dealers and at gun shows without needing any kind of background check.
On another issue, South Korean officials said that North Korea is open to diplomatic talks with the U.S. Press Secretary Sarah Huckabee Sanders said Monday that any dialogue must work toward the North stopping its nuclear program. Is it likely for the regime to come to the table if the U.S. is framing the talks that way?
Well, I mean, it sounds like right now the North Koreans are actually interested. They've just put on this diplomatic effort, participating in the Olympics, trying to be buddy-buddy with the South Koreans there, walking together, competing together. But the administration has kind of been rhetorically all over the map here. You had Sarah's comments there that you just referred to, but you also had the president saying that he's open to talks so long as the North Koreans agree to completely get rid of their nuclear program. And so where exactly is the administration standing here? It's not quite clear. Is the idea that they need to be open to disarmament? Is the idea that they need to agree beforehand, that they'll agree to complete denuclearization? That's something that they're not likely to do. And so I think it's all a matter here, the back and forth of what those conditions are that come before any kinds of talks.
Also on Monday, Jill, the Supreme Court said it will not consider the Trump administration's appeal of a lower court's decision that it must accept DACA renewal applications. What does that mean for recipients of the DACA program?
So this is interesting. So what the administration tried to do here was basically to fast track this legal challenge. They were very angry at the fact that the San Francisco judge, this federal district court judge, decided to allow DACA renewals to continue while this fight is going on. The administration tried to push it immediately to the Supreme Court to try to get them to rule, to try to fast track it. The Supreme Court said, no, this is going to have to go through the usual channels. You're just going to have to wait. In the meantime, while all of this has been happening, DHS has been continuing to process renewals. Those are renewals for folks whose permits expired before March 5th, as well as folks whose renewals expired after March 5th, which means that if you are a DACA recipient who currently has a DACA work permit, you can continue working and you can continue filing applications for renewals, which means that March 5th deadline that we've been hearing the president and Congress talk about all the time, it basically doesn't mean anything anymore. That said, if you're a DACA recipient, you're still in this strange legal limbo where your fate really is going to depend on what these courts decide to do. Who knows what Congress is going to come up with? Who knows what new executive action the president must take or might decide to take? And so they're still, despite the fact that this is kind of seen as positive news for them, given a little bit of a reprieve, they're still in this very, very difficult kind of tenuous state.
Well, the status of DACA, as you know, has been widely debated. It was at the center of the government shutdown last month. How does this ruling impact how both parties look at passing DACA legislation potentially?
Well, I mean, the problem here, if you're trying to get to a legislative solution, is that a lot of the pressure has now been taken off of lawmakers. And I mean, look, they didn't accomplish much when they thought that they were facing a March 5th deadline. Now, without that deadline pressing up against them, I think it's probably very unlikely that we're going to see any type of new legislative push in any of the next couple of months.
All right, Jill Colvin at the White House. Jill, thank you so much.